Okay, well, maybe I should have rehearsed this ahead of time, but you can tell that the tissue catches fire, it burns up. It's what you expect. What would be unusual would be if I held this above the fire and it just kept burning without burning out. This is what we're going to see in our passage today in Exodus chapter 3. I'm recovering from COVID. My fever has broken, but my cough is still pretty severe. So please forgive me if I cough a little bit. Moses is tending his father-in-law's sheep in Exodus chapter 3, and he sees a bush on fire. He'd seen fire before, maybe lightning had struck a bush in the past, and he'd seen that, and that wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that the bush didn't burn up. And so we're reading in verse 3, he says, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. And then in verse 4, God speaks to Moses from the burning bush. Moses, Moses, here I am, he said. Take off your sandals. You're standing on holy ground. And as we continue to read, we see the call of God upon Moses to be the deliverer of the Egyptian people who are in Egyptian slavery and bondage. But what stands out to me, and what I want to point out to you, is verse 7. God, still speaking out of this burning bush, says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them. God said, I see their misery. I've heard their cries. I care, and I'm here to rescue them. I'd like to just think about those phrases. God says, I see their misery. I know what they're going through. Have you ever felt like no one knows the misery that you're going through? You're having a difficult time in your life. Maybe it's in a relationship. Maybe it's with a job or a difficult person. Maybe it's a health issue in your life. Finances can make you miserable if they're not good. Maybe you're just depressed and it makes you miserable. And sometimes you may feel like no one even sees that. No one knows. I'm very encouraged that that God told Moses, I see their misery. And then he says, I'm concerned about their suffering. Not only do I know about their pain, he said, I care. There's a God in heaven who cares. And maybe at times in your life you've felt like the disciples when they were in the boat and Jesus was asleep, sound asleep in the middle of a storm, and the waves are crashing over the boat. The boat's filling up with water. They're bailing as fast as they can. And where's Jesus? He's sound asleep. And you remember them waking him up saying, Jesus, don't you care that we're perishing? And Jesus stood up and he calmed the storm with a word. Have you ever felt like shaking your fist and saying, God, don't you care? I want you to know that not only does he see your pain, he cares. He cares about you. And if you feel like he's asleep on the job, it's only because you can't see the whole picture. You can't see what God sees. God knows that he's going to rescue them. And that's the third phrase I wanted you to see in verse 8. God says, I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, to bring them out of that land of slavery and into a good, spacious land that flows with milk and honey. In a moment, and we don't have time to do it, and my voice wouldn't last if I wanted to, but if you read the rest of the chapter and chapter 4, Moses objects. He says in verse 11, "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" And God says, "Don't worry, I'll be with you." And then later, he's going to say, but what if they don't listen to me? And then God says, they'll listen. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to throw your staff on the ground and it's going to turn into a snake and you're going to get their attention. And then Moses in chapter 4, he says, "But I'm not very eloquent. I don't speak well. Would you just please choose somebody else?" He forgot what God said all the way back here in verse 8. God said, "I've come to rescue them. Moses, you're my human instrument. I'm just going to use you. But I'm doing all the heavy lifting. I am the rescuer. You can trust me." And so I just want to encourage somebody today with the knowledge that your God sees your pain, whatever it is. He not only sees where you are and sees how you're hurting, he cares. He cares about your pain and he cares about you. And ultimately, he will be the one to rescue you. I'll share with you something that's helped me over the years as I've struggled at times with suffering. God is too kind to do anything cruel, too wise to make a mistake, and too deep to explain himself. Trust him. He sees. He knows what you're going through. He cares. And ultimately, he's the one who can rescue you. Have a blessed day. And we'll see you tomorrow.